"Security, we need you in the ER." The nurse's voice echoed through Northwestern Memorial Hospital as she pointed at the homeless man sitting in the corner. 72-year-old William Murphy looked up with tired eyes, used to being unwanted wherever he went. But what the hospital staff didn't know was that this vagrant had once saved 37 lives in the jungles of Vietnam and held the nation's highest military honor. It was a cold December morning in Chicago, and the emergency room at Northwestern Memorial Hospital was bustling with the usual mix of patients seeking medical care. The prestigious hospital, located in the heart of downtown Chicago, prided itself on providing world-class medical treatment to patients from all walks of life. But like many urban hospitals, it also dealt with its share of homeless individuals seeking shelter from the harsh winter weather. William Murphy had been sitting in the corner of the waiting room for nearly 3 hours, clutching a worn brown paper bag that contained his few possessions. His clothes were old and tattered, his gray beard unkempt, and he carried the unmistakable odor of someone who had been living on the streets for far too long. To the casual observer, he looked like just another homeless man seeking a warm place to spend a few hours. The emergency room nurse, Linda Patterson, had been working at Northwestern Memorial for 8 years and had developed what she considered a practical approach to dealing with homeless patients. She viewed them as a drain on hospital resources, people who came in with minor complaints just to get out of the cold. In her experience, most of them left without treatment anyway, making their presence more of a disruption than anything else. "Excuse me, sir," Linda said curtly as she approached William's chair. "You've been sitting here for quite a while. Do you actually need medical attention, or are you just trying to stay warm?" Her tone was professional but cold, making it clear that she considered his presence an inconvenience. William looked up at her, with eyes that had seen too much pain, both physical and emotional. "I'm having chest pains, ma'am," he said quietly, his voice hoarse from years of smoking and living rough. "Been having them for a few days now, but they got worse this morning." Linda glanced at his appearance and made a quick assessment. In her mind, chest pains from a homeless man were likely just an excuse to stay inside. She had heard similar complaints countless times before. "When was the last time you had something to eat?" she asked, assuming his discomfort was probably just hunger or indigestion. "Yesterday morning, I think," William replied honestly. "Found some bread behind a bakery." This confirmed Linda's suspicions. "Well, that's probably your problem right there," she said dismissively. "You need food, not medical care. There's a soup kitchen about 6 blocks from here that opens at noon. I suggest you head over there." William felt the familiar sting of rejection, but he was too tired to argue. He had learned long ago that explaining himself rarely made any difference. People saw what they wanted to see, and what they saw when they looked at him was failure, weakness, and irrelevance. They didn't see the young soldier who had volunteered for the most dangerous missions in Vietnam, who had carried wounded comrades to safety under heavy enemy fire, who had been willing to give his life for his country. But the chest pains were getting worse, and William knew this wasn't just hunger. He had experienced enough medical issues over the years to recognize when something was seriously wrong. "Ma'am, I really think I need to see a doctor," he said, trying to keep the desperation out of his voice. "This feels different from anything I've had before." Linda's patience was wearing thin. She had a busy shift ahead of her, and dealing with what she perceived as a non-emergency was not how she wanted to spend her time. "Sir, our emergency room is for people with actual medical emergency. You're taking up space that sick people need." Her words cut deep, but William was accustomed to being made to feel like a burden. He had been living on the streets of Chicago for nearly a decade, ever since the combination of PTSD, alcoholism, and job loss had cost him his apartment, his relationship, and his dignity. The transition from war hero to homeless veteran had been gradual but inexorable, a slow slide into poverty and isolation that he had been powerless to stop. What Linda Patterson and the other hospital staff couldn't know was that William Murphy had once been Sergeant First Class William Murphy of the 1st Infantry Division, a highly decorated soldier who had served 2 tours of duty in Vietnam. He had enlisted in 1968 at the age of 18, driven by a sense of patriotic duty and a desire to serve his country in its time of need. During his first tour, William had distinguished himself as a reliable and courageous soldier. He had participated in numerous combat operations, including the fierce fighting around Saigon during the Tet Offensive, but it was during his second tour, in the jungle regions near the Cambodian border, that William would perform the actions that would earn him the Medal of Honor. On March 15, 1970, William's platoon had been ambushed by a large force of North Vietnamese Army regulars while on a reconnaissance mission deep in enemy territory. The attack came without warning, and within minutes, half of his unit was either dead or wounded, with their commanding officer killed in the initial assault and their radio operator critically injured. The remaining soldiers found themselves pinned down by heavy machine gun fire, with no way to call for support. It was William who took charge of the desperate situation. Despite being wounded by shrapnel from a grenade explosion, he organized the defense of their position and began the dangerous work of evacuating the wounded. One by one, he carried or dragged his injured comrades to a more secure position, exposing himself to enemy fire each time he ventured into the open. When a wounded soldier became trapped in a particularly exposed area where enemy snipers could easily target him, William made a decision that exemplified the highest traditions of military service. He crawled through 50 yards of open ground under intense fire, reached the wounded man, and carried him to safety. But the soldier was too badly injured to survive without immediate medical attention, and the nearest landing zone for a medical evacuation helicopter was more than a quarter-mile away through dense jungle. Without hesitation, William picked up the wounded soldier and began the treacherous journey to the landing zone. Enemy forces pursued them, and William had to fight a running battle while carrying his injured comrade. At one point, he was forced to put the wounded man down and engage a group of enemy soldiers who were blocking their path. After neutralizing the threat, he picked up his comrade again and continued toward the extraction point. By the time William reached the landing zone, he had saved not just that one soldier, but had made multiple trips back to rescue a total of 37 men from his unit. His actions over the course of 6 hours had saved nearly every surviving member of his platoon. The recommendation for the Medal of Honor was immediate and unanimous among the officers who investigated the action. The citation read in part, "Sergeant First Class Murphy's extraordinary heroism and selfless devotion to duty were in keeping with the highest traditions of the military service and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army." The medal was presented to him by President Nixon in a ceremony at the White House in 1971. But the young man who had been celebrated at the White House bore little resemblance to the homeless veteran sitting in the Northwestern Memorial Emergency Room more than 50 years later. The transition had been gradual and painful, marked by struggles that were all too common among Vietnam veterans. William had returned from the war carrying invisible wounds that would take decades to understand and treat. What is now recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder was barely acknowledged in the 1970s, and veterans were expected to simply readjust to civilian life without support or treatment. William struggled with nightmares, flashbacks, and a profound sense of disconnection from the world around him. He had tried to build a normal life after the war, working a series of jobs and attempting to maintain relationships. But the demons he carried made stability elusive. He turned to alcohol to numb the pain, and the drinking eventually cost him his job, his marriage, and his home. By the early 2010s, he was living on the streets, one of thousands of homeless veterans in American cities. The Medal of Honor that he had earned through such extraordinary courage was now his most precious possession, carefully wrapped and hidden in the inner pocket of his worn jacket. He carried it everywhere, not out of pride, but as a reminder of who he used to be, of a time when his life had meaning and purpose. As William sat in the emergency room, feeling increasingly unwell and increasingly unwanted, he was unaware that his situation was about to change dramatically. Sarah Martinez, the attending physician in the emergency room, had been observing the interaction between Linda Patterson and the homeless patient from across the room. Martinez was a 35-year-old emergency medicine specialist who had been working at Northwestern Memorial for 7 years. Unlike some of her colleagues, she had maintained a deep sense of compassion for all patients, regardless of their circumstances. She had grown up in a working-class family and understood how quickly life could change for anyone. Linda, Dr. Martinez called out as she approached the nurse's station. "What's the situation with the gentleman in the corner?" Linda looked up from her paperwork with a slightly exasperated expression. "Just another homeless guy looking for a warm place to sit. Says he has chest pains, but I think he's just hungry. I was about to have security escort him out." Dr. Martinez frowned. "Has anyone actually examined him or taken his vital signs?" "Well, no, but," Linda began. "Then how do we know he doesn't have a legitimate medical concern?" Dr. Martinez interrupted. "Chest pain is something we take seriously, regardless of who's experiencing it." Linda felt defensive about her assessment. "Doctor, I've been doing this for 8 years. I can usually tell when someone is just looking for a place to stay warm." "Maybe," Martinez said, "but we're not in the business of making assumptions about people's medical needs based on their appearance. I'm going to examine him." Dr. Martinez walked over to where William was sitting and knelt down beside his chair so she could speak to him at eye level. "Sir, I'm Dr. Martinez. I understand you're experiencing chest pain. Can you tell me more about what you're feeling?" William was surprised by the doctor's respectful tone and genuine concern. "It started as a dull ache a few days ago," he explained, "but this morning it got much sharper. It's right here," he said, pointing to the center of his chest, "and it sometimes radiates down my left arm." Dr. Martinez's expression became serious. Those were classic symptoms of a potential heart attack, and she wasn't about to dismiss them just because the patient was homeless. "How long have you been experiencing the arm pain?" she asked. "About an hour now," William replied. "We need to get you into an examination room right away," Dr. Martinez said, standing up and signaling to a nearby orderly. "Can you walk, or would you prefer a wheelchair?" William was touched by her concern and professionalism. "I can walk, thank you." As they made their way to the examination room, Linda Patterson watched with barely concealed annoyance. In her opinion, Martinez was wasting valuable time and resources on someone who probably just needed a meal and a shower. In the examination room, Dr. Martinez conducted a thorough assessment of William's condition. His blood pressure was elevated, his pulse was irregular, and an electrocardiogram showed clear signs of cardiac distress. It was obvious that he was indeed experiencing a heart attack, probably brought on by a combination of factors, including poor nutrition, stress, and underlying heart disease. Dr. Martinez paused, realizing she didn't know his name. "Murphy," William said quietly. "William Murphy. Mr. Murphy, you're having a heart attack. We need to get you to our cardiac unit immediately. You're going to need emergency treatment to prevent permanent damage to your heart." William felt a mixture of relief that his pain was being taken seriously and fear about what this meant for his future. "Doctor, I should tell you that I don't have insurance. I can't pay for treatment." Dr. Martinez looked at him with compassion. "Mr. Murphy, right now the only thing that matters is getting you the treatment you need. We'll worry about everything else later." What happened next would change not just William's immediate medical situation, but would profoundly impact everyone who learned his story. As Martinez was preparing to have William transferred to the cardiac unit, his worn jacket fell open, and she noticed something unusual in the inner pocket. "Mr. Murphy," she said gently, "what's that in your pocket?" William's hand moved instinctively to protect his most precious possession. It's something personal, Doctor." Dr. Martinez could see that whatever it was held significant meaning for him. "I just want to make sure it's secure during your treatment. Sometimes personal items can get lost during medical procedures." William hesitated for a moment, then slowly reached into his pocket and withdrew a small worn box. "It's my medal," he said simply, opening the box to reveal the distinctive blue ribbon and star-shaped medal that represented the highest honor the United States military could bestow. Martinez stared at the medal, then back at William. Her understanding of who she was treating suddenly transformed. "Mr. Murphy," she said softly, "is this a Medal of Honor?" William nodded, his eyes moist with emotion. "Vietnam, 1970, saved 37 men from my platoon." Martinez felt a wave of shame wash over her as she realized how close the hospital staff had come to turning away a genuine American hero. "Mr. Murphy, I am so sorry for how you were treated when you arrived. That should never have happened." William shook his head. "Doctor, you've been nothing but kind to me. I'm used to, well, I'm used to people not seeing past the surface." But Dr. Martinez was already thinking beyond William's immediate medical needs. She was thinking about the broader implications of what had almost happened, and what it said about how society treats its most vulnerable veterans. "Mr. Murphy, with your permission, I'd like to make sure that our entire staff knows about your service. Not because you need special treatment. Every patient deserves good care, but because your story needs to be heard." William was hesitant. He had learned to keep his military service private, partly out of humility, and partly because it often led to uncomfortable questions about how a Medal of Honor recipient had ended up homeless. "Doctor, I appreciate what you're saying, but I don't need any special attention. I just need to get better." "I understand," Dr. Martinez said, "but I think there are people here who need to understand what happened today and why it matters." As William was being prepared for emergency cardiac surgery, Dr. Martinez took it upon herself to address what had happened. She called a meeting with the emergency room staff, including Linda Patterson, and explained the situation. "This morning we nearly turned away a Medal of Honor recipient because we made assumptions based on his appearance," she began. "Murphy, the homeless man some of you wanted to have removed by security, is one of the most decorated veterans in American history. He saved 37 lives in Vietnam and received our nation's highest military honor." The room fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. Linda Patterson felt a sick feeling in her stomach as she realized how close she had come to denying medical care to a genuine war hero. "The point isn't that Mr. Murphy is a Medal of Honor recipient," Dr. Martinez continued. "The point is that he's a human being who came to us for help, and we almost failed him. If he had been anyone else, if he had been a successful businessman, a college professor, or a police officer, we would have treated him with respect and dignity. The fact that he's homeless shouldn't change that." She paused to let her words sink in before continuing. "Mr. Murphy's service to our country is remarkable and deserves recognition. But more importantly, his humanity deserves recognition. Every person who comes through those doors deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their circumstances." Linda Patterson raised her hand tentatively. "Doctor, is Mr. Murphy going to be okay? He's in surgery now," Dr. Martinez replied. "The cardiac team is optimistic, but it was a serious heart attack. If he had been turned away this morning, if he had gone back out into the cold instead of receiving treatment, he very likely would have died." The weight of that possibility hung heavy in the room. Linda Patterson realized that her prejudices and assumptions had nearly cost a man his life. Not just any man, but someone who had risked his own life to save others. The surgery was successful, and William Murphy recovered well enough to be moved to a regular room within a few days. But his stay at Northwestern Memorial had attracted attention that extended far beyond the hospital walls. Dr. Martinez had contacted the local Veterans Affairs office to ensure that William received the benefits and support he was entitled to as a veteran. She had also reached out to several veterans organizations and social service agencies to help address his homelessness. Word of William's story had spread through the hospital, and many staff members had come by to thank him for his service and to apologize for how he had been initially treated. But the person most affected by the entire experience was Linda Patterson. "Mr. Murphy," she said as she entered his room on the third day after his surgery, "I owe you an apology. When you came to our emergency room, I made assumptions about you that were wrong and hurtful. I'm deeply sorry." William looked at her with understanding rather than anger. "Ma'am, you don't need to apologize. You were just doing your job the way you thought was right." "No," Linda said, shaking her head. "I wasn't doing my job right. My job is to help people who need medical care, not to judge whether they deserve it based on how they look or where they live." She paused, collecting her thoughts. "I want you to know that this experience has changed how I see things. I've signed up for training on working with homeless populations, and I'm going to volunteer at a veterans shelter on my days off." William was moved by her words and her obvious sincerity. "That means a lot to me, Linda." But the most important thing is that you treat every person who comes through those doors like they matter. I will, she promised. I absolutely will. The story of William Murphy's treatment at Northwestern Memorial Hospital eventually made local news, highlighting both the challenges faced by homeless veterans and the importance of treating all patients with dignity and respect. The hospital used the incident as a learning opportunity, implementing new training programs and policies to ensure that similar situations wouldn't occur in the future. More importantly for William, the attention his story received led to a coordinated effort to address his housing situation. A local veterans organization, working with the VA and several community groups, was able to arrange permanent housing for him in a veterans facility. For the first time in nearly a decade, William had a stable place to live. As William prepared to leave the hospital, Martinez visited him one final time. "Mr. Murphy, I want to thank you for the grace you've shown throughout this entire experience." A lesser man might have been bitter about how he was initially treated. William smiled. "Doctor, I learned a long time ago that holding on to anger only hurts yourself. Besides, good things came from this. That nurse, Linda, is going to help a lot of people because of what happened here. What about you?" Dr. Martinez asked. "What's next?" William thought for a moment. "I'm going to get settled in my new place, take care of my health, and maybe find ways to help other veterans who are going through what I went through. There are a lot of good people out there who just need someone to see past the surface." As William left Northwestern Memorial Hospital, he carried with him not just his Medal of Honor, but a renewed sense of purpose. His experience had reminded him that even in the darkest circumstances, human dignity could be restored, and that one person's story could make a difference in how others are treated. The homeless veteran who had been ignored and dismissed had not only received the medical care he needed, but had also taught an entire hospital staff about the importance of seeing every person who seeks their help as worthy of respect and compassion. Linda Patterson, who had once viewed homeless patients as problems to be managed, became one of Northwestern Memorial's most effective advocates for vulnerable populations. Martinez continued to use William's story in training sessions to help medical professionals understand the importance of treating all patients with dignity. William Murphy's Medal of Honor had been earned through extraordinary courage on a battlefield in Vietnam more than 50 years earlier. But his quiet dignity in the face of prejudice and his gracious response to those who had wronged him demonstrated a different kind of courage. The courage to maintain one's humanity and compassion even in the most difficult circumstances. The homeless veteran who had almost been turned away from the hospital had reminded everyone involved that heroism comes in many forms, and that every person, regardless of their current circumstances, carries within them a story worthy of respect and consideration.